Hello and welcome back. This is ProTailDev back with another university project video. This time we're going to be looking at the group project, specifically the ethics of loot boxes project. This was a 4-people group, and so I'll talk about the specific roles first. A quick mention as well that I won't be showing the full names of the other members. Although we do have a blog that I'll show later, I'll blur out their names in the video. However, they do have their names officially on their blogs, so I couldn't do anything about that. Just keep their names private in case they don't want it to be shown. That's what we're doing in the video. I'll just be referencing them from their first name or their role. Okay, so to start off with, our project was ethics of loot boxes. We were given lots of different projects that we could do, themes that we could do. However, this is the theme that we went with for our group. We decided this together amongst all the others, and we felt that this was the most topical, the most important topic right now, the most relevant, and so we really wanted to go with this and kind of explore it. We were given, we actually had to meet a client, so the client that was in charge of this, we had to actually meet him and talk to him about all these different concepts and different things about ethics of loot boxes, what's wrong and things like that, and then kind of build that into a game. And we had to show him a bunch of different concept designs that we came up with, different ideas, and basically whichever one he liked the most we went with. So we'll talk about that in a minute. First, let's go back to the roles. So the roles that we had was the main programmer, we had the project manager, we had the main game designer, and the last one was the artist, the main artist. So what ended up happening is, first of all, I'll talk about who was doing what. So David was our main game designer. We had me, who was the project manager, essentially the leader of the group, in charge of all things like roles and stuff. And then we had Mariana was the main programmer, and Clavs was our main art designer, our main artist. So what we wanted to do was we split our roles obviously together, but we wanted to try and spread out the functions a little bit, rather than just centralizing those roles for those tasks, mainly because creating a game is a huge job, and we had a lot of different roles that we had to do in like small tasks that we had to do. So it was quite difficult to specifically specialize those roles when we had so much to do, especially later on in the project. So that was their roles, and let's talk about my role specifically. That's what this is about. This is what the video will be focusing on, is specifically what I've done throughout the project, with quick mentions from the other members. Okay, so first of all, again, going back to the ethics of loot boxes, we basically got our small brief from the client, and this is the small brief that we got, and we just had to follow it as best we could. It was very, very vague, and so we were able to kind of think of different ideas. Now, we all came up with our own individual ideas that would be, and we kind of all voted on what we thought was really good and kind of went with what we've got. And then what we had is, we took all those ideas to our client, and like I said, we all voted to see what all we like, and we kind of played around with the ideas, and eventually we went with a endless runner game, because the main focus was actually phones, specifically because the loot boxes is such a problem in phones, in phone games. That was the main focus, was phones, and endless runners are very, very popular on phones. So we ended up going with that idea, which was David's. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is specifically the meetings. So I was in charge of the management of the group as the project manager. This means that I had to handle all of the interactions with the client. I had to email, I had to phone the client many times to organise meetings, to get in contact. I was the direct bridge between our group and our client, and whenever there was something wrong, I'd always contact him. If there was something that, if he couldn't make it for a meeting or we couldn't, I would always contact him about it, or he would contact me. And so this is our meeting. So as you can see, I managed to go to every single meeting. As project manager, I felt like I had to, no matter what. And I'm glad I did, because I always was taking notes. I was always managing everything that was being said, and I always jotted down as much as possible and is in as much detail. And then we'd eventually go back. Our group would go away, and we would expand on those ideas and those tasks in Jira, which we'll talk about in a minute. So as you can see, yep, I didn't miss any meetings. I went to all of them. Our group was actually pretty good. We went to most of us went to pretty much all of it. There's a couple of our members that missed a couple of meetings, but that was no big issue. We'd always sit our group members down that may have missed it and talk about it. But as you can see, it was mostly good. A few cancellations. I think one of them was from us, and the rest were the client, because we're busy man. And so that was fine. Everything worked out. We were on really good terms with the client, and we got along with him very well, and we understood what he was going for, what his views were, and he was very, very pleased at the end result that we had. And he also enjoyed our company, enjoyed talking to us about it. It was a very good experience, very positive experience for both our group and him. And he ended up taking that project away to a group that he would use for classes to explain loot boxes on a game that we created, which is quite a great and satisfying feeling. So that was our group management. I was in charge of making sure to write this down specifically for our tutor and for our lecturer to mark this later and figure out what we've been doing. So yeah, I was in charge of this. I was also in charge of making sure managing the availability of everyone, which I've got on a separate document, which I don't really want to go into too much detail because it's quite extensive. It's a lot of text, but basically it's all the different times and different availabilities for each month, and so it's quite lengthy. The next thing I want to show is specifically once we had our different ideas and we'd spoken to our client, we ended up doing a PowerPoint presentation. We ended up doing a presentation to our peers who were on the other projects at the time, and I think it was basically we had to do it in front of everyone else who had already done their projects, partially to demonstrate what we were doing to what we've been doing. And this was about a few weeks after, I think it was maybe 4 or 5 weeks after we'd started the project and after we'd spoken to our client, which was about a week after. So this is about 4 weeks after the project has started and we'd already spoken to our client, and we basically narrowed it down to the endless runner, as I said. Basically, just to cut to what this is, I basically explained what the project was, what we were aiming for, what our client wanted. That was our job. These frames are very, very specific. It was more about us talking about it than what was shown on the PowerPoint. These were things to help people visualize what we were doing, but we actually talked mostly through it. And this is what I had to do. So a lot of the time the project manager will have to manage on a specific program all the different tasks and all the different things that we had to do, just to stay organized and manage who's doing what and how long they spent on it. So this is what I used. I used Jira, which a lot of the other project managers had to do in the other groups as well. And I stayed on top of this constantly. I made sure that everyone was up to date. Whenever someone finished a project, I'd update it. At the very beginning, a lot of the members were confused about how it worked, how the time management was being calculated. And to be honest, this was also new to me. So while I was a lot more confident using it, because I had to use it as the project manager. I had to be on top of everything, updating everything. A lot of the other members who would occasionally update their tasks to be completed, they didn't really understand how to create the tasks, since I was doing that with them kind of taking a back seat and instructing what tasks they could do. This was still a group project. This was still something we discussed together, so we'd write down all the different tasks in here and I'd specifically create them, and then they could just look it up, see what they need to do, what was in progress, and then when it was done they would update it to be done. Although I still was the main lead trying to manage it, because that was my job. It was part of my main role, was to manage Jira, manage all the different dashboards and things like that. and the specific tasks moving them around was my job. But yeah, everything was fine, everything worked out. I also determined how many tasks people could do over time based on their schedules and their other projects, and things went well. So at this point we'd done quite a lot. We'd successfully managed to complete a tremendous amount of tasks, and this was only just the first couple of weeks. This was basically before our alpha build, and this was all concepts and stuff like that. And then we moved on to David would then explain the game idea, which is simply a ball it's very, very basic, but that was the point. It was meant to be basic to kind of show all the different endless runners concepts into one idea. So it's just a ball that would move along a platform, a bunch of platforms, jump from platform to platform, and they would essentially just get attacked. They would have to jump over spikes, or they get blocked by a wall, and if they end up hitting a certain lower than a certain speed, they would die, they wouldn't be able to move. You'd be able to buy things, so after David explained some of the things like the money, and the concept of what it will be, like premium money and points, we eventually moved on to Mariana, who would then explain the more complicated things like customization, the coding for that, and idea of things like saves and stuff, as well as see if I can find it, as well as kind of some of the jump mechanics and stuff like that, some of the basic things we'd have, maybe other areas and levels. And then after that we moved on to the art. So the art would then be handled by Clavs, who would have different skins and different things that to be used. And these different skins would be unlocked within the loot boxes, and these would be also a way to motivate the player to carry on playing and to carry on trying to unlock newer and bigger things, cooler skins. We also had a few other ideas of what we wanted, but some of them made it, some of them didn't. Okay, so that was our first presentation. So after that point we then began working on a alpha build, ready for a showcase. So in the weeks after that, we'd have, I think it was about 3 weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, but we would then do a showcase to not just our group, not just our class, but actually multiple classes who wanted to come in if they wanted to work on stories. So this was writers on a different course, specifically like things like game writers. There was a couple of actors and things like that who may have wanted to work with us on our games. Our game really didn't have much of a story. Like most endless runners, don't have a huge amount of story, and so there wasn't much voice acting that needed, so we ended up not having anyone join us. Of course, this was completely their choice. They didn't need to if they didn't want to. If they didn't find ours interesting enough or didn't feel like they could fit in, then that was fine, and they could always go with a different group. So after that, we ended up coming back. We did another presentation. And this was after the actual event took place. So during our specific project, we ended up having a pre-release, a pre-alpha version, and this tied in a lot to our schedule and our patch notes that we had to do. So throughout the whole thing we did a patch notes, which I've got here, and these patch notes basically went through the entire process of all the things we had. So we had the friends and family alpha version. This was before the alpha version, and this was all the stuff we had for the showcase. This was our very, very first version that we had. As you can see, you can see all the things we did. We did Death Zone. We had the basic money in and basic speed. We had basically quite a lot of things already done. All the basic concepts, all the basic programming and things like that. And then we also had a few fixes that we need to be done and a few bugs. Now we'll move on to the alpha in a minute. But basically this was our pre-alpha version. Very, very basic. It was just a really terrible menu. The basic ball, basic counters and time. The money was in and the platforms were in. You also had this was meant to be a spike with this block, so you have to jump over it. If you get hit by it, you die. And then what we had is just after that version, I think it was about a week, we spent then just looking at design to make the level look a little bit nicer. So we added a few more materials. It basically looked like this. Hopefully it gives you a very brief idea of what we had, but it was basically enough to show off to people what we're going for. And while we were showing it off, we were explaining kind of what we wanted and what our client wanted. And this was to people to try and gauge their interest. A lot of them liked it, they liked the idea of it, and we ended up having to do a questionnaire. So this was the results of our questionnaire. We asked some very basic, very vague questions, whether they liked it or not, liked the idea of it when we talked about it, liked the idea of things like power-ups and things that we were working towards. And we got some very good feedback, some interesting feedback, and also some comparisons to other games, as well as ideas from people of what they wanted to see. And so after the showcase, what we ended up working, the main thing that we gained insight from was that people really wanted animations, they wanted things to look better. They also wanted to see the shop, since it was the main part of the ethics of loot boxes. It was the main thing to focus on, so they really wanted to see a shop available that players can get loot boxes and buy things from. People wanted also to focus on the player input because it wasn't very engaging, it wasn't very responsive, and they also wanted us to work on the menu and navigation a little bit better. So those were our main things that people really wanted to see, so we wrote that down, we took that into account. And what we wanted to now work on was loot boxes, procedural generation. We also wanted a local high score tracking so people could try and beat the high score. Internal mechanics testing, so we wanted movement and controls to be more tested and refined, as well as further asset creation for the level, the UI, and just in general make the game look a lot better. So that was the pre-alpha. And things were really going very, very well at that point. Next, what they wanted was, of course, this was a quick show of the questionnaire. This was the questionnaire that we ended up doing, and I think we used Google Forms. I think that's correct, what we used, which is quite easy to do. And we allowed people to basically input their details, and this is all the information in one Excel sheet. Okay. So after that point, we then wanted to move on to our alpha build. So if I go here to our patch notes, this was our alpha build. So we wanted to add in the high score, which we did. We added the shop menu. We also added quite some power-ups. We added coin saving, so we were able to save. We added procedural generation, but very, very basic, as well as level segments that would be built for the procedural generation, and checkpoints and destructible mesh. And as you can see, you can go down this list yourself for fixes and things. I'll just be skipping over them from now on, and I'll just quickly show them. So those were the plans for the alpha build, and everything went very, very well. We spoke to our client about this and showed them what we had. We let him play it, and he was very, very pleased at the progress. And we also showed this to our instructor that also asked for feedback from him. And we got that, of course, from the feedback from the project, from the presentation. We also showed the demonstration of the game as well, just in case they didn't get a chance to see it, or some people didn't get to see it, and we also got a chance to get feedback from other people. So if I'll quickly show that. So this is something that I showed. So this was the pre-alpha, which was the family and friends. This was the feedback we got when we showed the game off. This was from our lecturer, as well as from the group as well. It's also been given feedback from the group. Also been given feedback from the class itself, and this is what we got. So we did okay for our first presentation. This was for the concepts and stuff like that, and what people thought. We then also had a feedback from much later on, so I believe this might have been the beta version, or possibly the alpha version, because we did the presentation again, and this was all about the alpha, which I just showed you then, and this is kind of the feedback we got. So we explained in a lot more detail, although it looks like there's not a lot in the presentation. We explained things in quite a lot of detail, and we explained things quite well. We actually got really good marks from our lecturer. However, we didn't do as well with the class, which is fine. I think we did very well. So moving on, we then ended up with the next version, which was our beta release. The beta release was a much more interesting, much more exciting time because we ended up doing quite a lot. Again, let's go to the patch notes. Sorry if this video is really long, but there was so much to cover. So then in our beta, you can see the list here of what we did. I'll let you pause that if you need to. We also began work on the VR version, which I'll have more details on that in a different video, because otherwise this video is going to be too long. But basically we then worked on, again, Jira. I worked incredibly a lot on Jira, trying to make sure everything was right, make sure the graphs were cool. We also made a lot of changes, and we also added a bunch of things. So this is just gameplay of our beta version, which we were quite pleased with. Of course the next version will be the release version, but this is our beta. Okay, coming back. So we also had our VR concept. Again, I'll talk about that another time. And so now we have early access, our early access version, which would have more in it, so more power-ups, loot boxes, and a bunch more things focusing on loot boxes, specifically things like animation and stuff. Okay. Now we also had feedback for that one, and because at this point we were very clear on what we wanted for the end game, we actually got excellent across the board. We presented this very, very well, and we were very, very pleased with it. We got excellent across, almost a 4 with our testing group in the class, which we were very, very happy with this result. We also had a questionnaire that was done specifically for so this was term 2. And this was during January when we first came back, and we had people play it. We had a ton of people play the beta version, see what people think, so that when we go into early access, people will kind of know what to expect. Early access is usually very much the game is more or less finished. It's just minor fixes going on and minor changes, and it's a time when players really give their honest. So after the beta, which is usually when all of the main functions in, the early access really won't be focused on any functions, and it's really basic stuff that needs to be fixed. Okay, so here we go. So I had all the results and we showed them off, and things were going really well. So we're going to skip the early access version for now because I'm just going to show the patch notes, and I don't want to show the beta. I've already showed the beta version. We have the early access, but we're going to be really, these were all about textures really, and things like jungle assets, which you can really see in the final version. The final version was shortly after. There was also a lot of work on VR and stuff like that, so we're just going to move down to the release candidate, which is the release version. And as you can see, this is all the notes we had. There's quite a lot in here. So before we get into the final version, actually, I want to quickly show off our concept document that we created together, our group created. And this is what we did. This is a main concept for both the main game and the VR. And specifically we showed off our comparison to other games that are successful, as well as things like project requirements, high spec, the purpose, and different things like that. Moving on, what we want to focus on now is, now that that's out the way, I now want to focus specifically on the release version and show that off. And while I'm showing that off, I'll also start talking about what I specifically worked on, and specifically what happened throughout the group. Of course, if you really want to know more details about my specific role, or what specifically we were doing at that time in each week, there's a blog that is available for you and there'll be a link in the description where you can look at every single week what we worked on, each individual person worked on, because our full names are on there. I spoke about that in the beginning, and there will be a link in the description to that blog. I'll quickly show it now. I only called it a designer's portfolio. I know it's not very original, but it basically has all information all the way up to the completion of the Ethics of Loot Box project, all the way up to the end, and it has everything covered very briefly about what I worked on specifically from every single task and everything that I did that week, from handling the group to individual stuff, and there's a link to everyone else's as well. So yep, you can look that up, link will be in the description. So let's get into the final release. Okay, so this is our final release. This was what was given to the client. As you can see, you'll immediately see the art style and the art that Clavs did. So things from the logo to the wood, and the buttons were all done by him. A lot of the coding was also split between me and Mariana. She couldn't spend as much time. She also had other commitments to other things like family reasons and stuff like that I don't want to get into. And so I actually ended up taking a lot of the programming roles and tasks. So I was also, I guess you could say I was the backup programmer, but I took over a lot of the main tasks, including the loot box system. I actually had to program all that myself. But let's get into it. Also, David would work on a lot of the level design, of course. As his role suggests, he worked on a lot of the levels design personally. So here we go, this is the main version. This is the main project. You can see the little pickups, we got the coins. Hopefully it's not too loud. You got to dodge the spikes which are glowing. The glow was also done by Clavs. This was one of the separate things he did apart from the art, was actually making his models that he created in Maya glow and do the specific materials for them. He also did a lot of the skins, customly created the skins. Oh, we're dead. So we got some coins there. We've also got a high score which is about to be updated. And then what we can do is we can restart, which is what we're going to do for now. And what we can do is we can go to our store. So if you press Q or you press that button, you can go to the store and we can spend our coins. So we've only got 24 coins, so we can't really afford anything right now. But if we click them, unfortunately, because we've got this unlocked specifically, we didn't put a meter on it because we want to demonstrate it, what you could unlock. But if you play a specific version that we gave to our client, you can't do that unless you click a add button in the shop. So what you want to do is you can come to here. We can also go to information, which I'll do in a minute. But let's buy a bunch of loot boxes, which is what this game's about. So you can see up here what our chances are, and if we actually get a chance of getting a loot box. So as you can see when we click there, no loot box that time. No loot box. And if you keep clicking, we just got a common. We got 2 common loot boxes. If you get a duplicate, the money goes back into your account, which is quite interesting. This is to try and get people to not worry about duplicates. And what we're going to do here is we're actually going to go for a higher one. And as you can see, common, rare, there's less chance of getting no loot boxes. There's more chance of getting a common and getting an uncommon, as well as a rare. But I don't think you can get a legendary getting this box. The only way to get a legendary is actually to buy the higher tier 1, which is really expensive. What we're going to do is we're going to click some of these so you can see them. And these are just basic skins. I believe this tier 3 is metal, this tier is gradient, and this tier is solid colours. And I think the 4th tier is more specific, so if we just press the much more higher rare versions, for the very 5th clone, you may have noticed there that it came up saying that we just got a special power-up. Now, the only way to get power-ups is either to collect them in the level, which is much rarer, or you can actually buy them. So this is another reason to buy the high tier. It's pretty frustrating because the only way to get them really is to buy them. But as you can see, you get much more cooler skins, and if we pay, and it's quite expensive as you can see, but there's a much more higher chance of getting a legendary, which we just did. So this is our legendary, which are animated skins. So if I just click continue now, there you go, we've got an animated glowy skin, and we've also got abilities, which we're going to use right now. So we just used one, and what that does is, let me just restart. So one of the things we didn't get time for is to save the pickups, but what that does is it basically gives you more armor. Unfortunately, I think I activated it too late because it has an activation timer, but that's okay. So as you can see, we're collecting things, And what we can do is we can continue, we can restart, we can go back to the main menu. Now what we're going to do is, as you can see, when you come out of the level, what will happen is it will tell you how much money you've spent of your own money from the shop that's at the main menu. So if we go in the shop and we look at how many coins we've actually got negative because of the reason I just suggested, but let's quickly reset our current coins. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to buy a bunch of things. Now we know it's 0, so we don't need to reset the money. This is here specifically to demonstrate this to the class for Tom, our client, to demonstrate so that he can control this whenever he needs. If this was a real game, you wouldn't have these options, obviously, but let's buy a bunch of stuff. So £20, let's buy a bunch of stuff. You can see it's added to our account on the top left there, and we're just buying a ton of money. Okay, and what we can do is we can now go into the game. We do have credits as well, which is we had to have for any game that we produce. We need to have any credits for anything we've used. But most of the stuff was actually created by ourselves, including the platforms, the water, most of the foliage was also created by us. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to continue. We're going to open up our... Oops, didn't mean to do that. We're about to die, but unfortunately. So what we're going to do is we're going to now see if we can get a couple more legendaries, which have been a bit unlucky. But there you go, we got a legendary again. Not my favourite, but let's keep going. I actually like this skin a lot more than any of the others. Oh, there we go, another skin. And what we're going to do here is, as you can see, we got a lot of money. Let's try and buy them all if we can. There we go, so we bought them all, apart from these. And one of the things that I did as well in this was I actually created the menu. So the loot box was handled specifically just by me. So all of this that you're seeing, including these images here, you may have seen them in the past. I actually created these as well. I drew these boxes, these loot boxes. I also created some of the art styles for some of this and some of the skins. I also handled the save data for the coins. Mariana did some of the other things like handling the specific count for speed. She handled a lot of the saves for, as well as the high score. I think she handled the saves for the high score. So we're just going to go into information, and as you can see, I handled a lot of the information for the loot boxes. So this is all of the chances and all of the different percentage of what you're going to get, what boxes you're going to get, and what purchase you get. The coins aren't quite right, but don't worry about that. And as you can see, these are the percentages. I had to work all these out. I had to do a lot of maths to try and work out all of these percentages, but it was worth it. So that was all the information. I'll actually show you the flow chart now. Let me just continue and die. Go to the menu, and as you can see, we can see how much we spent, which is how much money, which is a lot of money, £486. So coming out of here, all the things that I worked on saves, a lot of the loot box system, and a lot of the menus. So the shop menu is actually done by me as well as this was also, so the very basic coding was done by me, and then the loot boxes was my main bit of coding, as well as saves for things like coins. Those were all done by me. Mariana took a lot of the rest of the coding, so a lot of the other saves and other working outs for things, but I also had to, we both improved each other's code as well, so we worked together quite closely on a lot of different tasks, especially the save. David worked on the procedural generation and the code for the procedural generation, as well as he worked on the platforms, like managing the different platforms and the trees. I actually found the trees. They're one of the free asset that we found, and David managed positioned them all, made the scene look nice, and Clavs obviously did the artwork. So yeah, that is the main game. So what I'm going to do is quickly show you the flow chart, which I had to do for the text. Of course, this was done with David as well, the flowchart specifically, especially this top part was done by David and me working together. Specifically when we get into the percentages, I did those and I worked out the maths. There was times when unfortunately we just didn't get time to do everything that we planned. Some things didn't work out, some power-ups just didn't work out. A lot of the power-up abilities were split between me and Mariana. We did different ones. However, as you can imagine, this was a great project that we worked together. We worked together really well. It was rough at the beginning when we were trying to find our foot into this game and try and get on the same page as one another, but after that things went really well. So yep, really happy with this project. I think that's everything. Yeah, check out the blog, it'll link in the description. I will have everything that I did. Specifically, there's a lot of things that I missed out. There was so much that we covered in this, and so yeah, definitely check that out. Okay, so that'll do it. This was a really long video. Unfortunately, there was just so much to show. However, I think that's everything. Again, look at my blog to see details, and look at their blogs as well. Their blogs are up there. There'll be a link in my blogs to their blog, so definitely check them out to see what they've done. And yeah, as the group leader, this was a great experience. I did quite a lot. Again, I was a bit of everything, a bit of the level design, bit of a go-between for our artist. I was a go-between for our lecturer, who I had to constantly speak to, as well as our client. So I did quite a lot in this project, which is why it's such a long video. So next time what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at animation, specifically what I did in my third year, obviously, and we'll be looking at the things like rigs that I did. I don't really have access to Maya anymore because I don't have my student account, which is why I couldn't show Jira, because I don't have my student account anymore, which shows off all the things we did. However, hopefully I'll be able to show you a few clips of the art I did, of the animation, and go into a bit of detail, so it's probably not going to be a long video like this one. Okay, that'll do it. I'll see you next time.